Most men fail with women because they overextend themselves. They respond too quickly, they overexplain, they stress prematurely. That's why this video isn't about becoming more charismatic, it's about becoming more composed. Men who understand detachment don't pursue, they draw others in. These 20 principles will demonstrate how quiet confidence defeats excessive effort repeatedly. Pay attention because I'm about to share something no one has presented to you with this degree of precision. The issue isn't that you lack understanding about women. The genuine issue is that you're overextending yourself, and I understand your thoughts. How can I reduce my efforts when I feel like I'm already doing insufficient? Precisely, that's the paradox. You've been convinced that you need to work harder, be more considerate, more demonstrative, more accessible. But here's the difficult reality. Each time you exceed what's necessary, you surrender a portion of influence. Consider this. Have you observed that individual who's perpetually available? The person who answers within seconds? The person who abandons his commitments the moment she reaches out? The person who's endlessly accessible, and are you aware of his outcome? He remains in limbo. Meanwhile, the alternative individual, the person immersed in his personal pursuits, the person who occasionally delays his responses, the person whose existence doesn't center around anyone, he occupies her thoughts constantly. This isn't sorcery, it's fundamental psychology. The human mind is programmed to pursue what remains difficult to obtain. When something is perpetually accessible, it diminishes in worth. It's the contrast between tap water and a vintage wine bottle. One is constantly present, the other requires earning. Machiavelli grasped this 5 centuries ago when he documented power dynamics. He recognized that whoever displays urgency forfeits control, and whoever maintains composure dominates the strategy. He wasn't addressing women specifically, but the concept is equivalent. Power never resides with the individual who exerts maximum effort. It belongs to whoever has minimal necessity to demonstrate anything. Now, the first principle of detachment is harsh in its directness, assign less significance than what she anticipates. And here's the aspect most individuals miss. It's not about feigning indifference. It's about authentically not anchoring your complete emotional stability to someone you've just encountered. Reflect on it. When you encounter someone unfamiliar, why experience anxiety? Why contemplate her throughout the day? You're unfamiliar with her. You're uncertain about compatibility. You're uncertain if your principles align. But somehow, men surrender their emotional balance before understanding their counterpart. And this establishes a foreseeable pattern. She anticipates your enthusiasm, your urgency, your attempts to impress her. And when you fulfill those expectations, you validate what she predicted. You resemble everyone else. But when you refrain, when you respond with steadiness, when you resist rushing, when your disposition remains unchanged regardless of her behavior, then you disrupt the sequence. There's a study in behavioral psychology termed value inversion that clarifies this flawlessly. When someone provides less emotional investment than anticipated, the recipient's mind enters heightened awareness. It attempts to decode the enigma. Why doesn't he respond like others? And that inquiry, that subtle puzzle, generates intrigue. It's the identical principle explaining why individuals queue for limited releases. It's not inherently superior, it's scarce, and scarcity invariably elevates perceived worth. Now the second principle, conduct yourself as if time is yours. This is essential. Detachment isn't conveyed solely through language. It's conveyed through every movement, through every interval, through how you traverse a space. Have you noticed how anxious men move hastily? They speak rapidly, they gesture excessively, they occupy every pause with conversation. It's as though they fear that without constant action, they'll forfeit the chance. And what's the result? That anxiety is transparent. And once it's transparent, attraction dissolves. The individual who controls his presence operates inversely. He articulates slowly, he hesitates before responding. He moves as though nothing could accelerate him. Not from arrogance, but because he genuinely possesses limitless time. This represents what social dynamics term tempo control. The authority figure consistently controls the interaction rhythm. Consider any influential person you recognize, authentic or imagined. Do they ever appear hurried? Do they ever rush to eliminate uncomfortable silences? Never. because they comprehend that authority exists in the interval. And here arrives the third principle, and this one is lethal. Allow silence to become your communication. The typical man fears silence intensely. When conversation pauses, he instantly seeks something to express, anything, because silence resembles defeat. But the influential individual recognizes that silence represents pressure. It constitutes a challenge, and whoever disrupts the silence initially surrenders. There's a concept in communication science termed status pressure. The mind interprets whoever remains comfortable with silence as possessing control. It's instinctual, primal, and it functions. Women examine this continuously, even unconsciously. They observe who becomes uncomfortable initially, who occupies the void. And when you resist, when you remain composed, relaxed, without requiring constant stimulation, your quietness becomes dominance. The silent individual becomes enigmatic, and enigma fuels attraction far beyond any sophisticated discourse. If this is resonating with you, if you're recognizing previously invisible patterns, then remain engaged, because what follows in subsequent sections will fundamentally transform your comprehension of attraction dynamics. You cannot afford to miss this. Now that you comprehend that less yields more, let me elevate you to a deeper understanding, because comprehending the concept differs entirely from executing it in real time. And that's where most individuals falter. They grasp the theory, but when confronting her, when sensing that atmospheric tension, they revert to previous patterns. Let's discuss silence. Not the uncomfortable silence you attempt avoiding, but the silence you employ strategically as an instrument, as leverage, as a declaration. Visualize this scenario. You're meeting someone, she expresses something, you listen, and rather than responding instantly with a sophisticated reply, or a remark demonstrating your intelligence, you simply maintain silence. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, you observe her. Perhaps you smile slightly, but you remain wordless. What occurs in her consciousness during those 5 seconds? She begins questioning, did I misspeak? Did he disapprove of my statement? Why isn't he responding? And while she's processing all that, you've already succeeded because presently she's contemplating you. She's attempting to decode you, and that represents precisely the position you desire. The difficulty is, we've been conditioned that silence equals emptiness, that we must occupy it, that successful conversation means continuous dialogue. But that's false. Silence isn't emptiness, it's dimension. And within that dimension, minds operate exponentially harder. There's a compelling study on executive negotiations. They discovered that in boardroom meetings, whoever controls the silences typically prevails because silence generates psychological tension. The counterpart begins feeling obligated to contribute something, offer something, occupy that vacant space, and when they do, they expose more than intended. This applies identically with women. When you can maintain silence without discomfort, you convey something powerful. That you don't require her perpetual approval, that you're secure with yourself, that you're not desperate about impressing her, and that composure, that silent assurance is captivating. Now, the fourth principle, regard validation as currency. Each time you deliver an effortless compliment, each time you approve indiscriminately, you diminish your attention's worth. It's fundamental economics. When something is oversupplied, it forfeits value, inflation. Recall childhood when your parents praised everything you attempted. Eventually it became meaningless, correct? The identical phenomenon occurs with masculine validation. If an individual commends everything she accomplishes, if he perpetually declares her beauty, her magnificence, without her earning it, that praise becomes ambient noise. It forfeits weight, it forfeits impact. But when an individual offers approval sparingly, when his compliments are selective and genuine, something transforms. Suddenly, that praise becomes precious. She remembers it, she treasures it, and unconsciously, she begins seeking more. I'm not suggesting cruelty, I'm not suggesting withholding compliments. I'm suggesting strategic validation, reserving it for moments when you genuinely experience it, when she's authentically accomplished something worthy of acknowledgement. When you implement this, you establish what psychology terms emotional gravity. Your approval becomes addictive because it's unpredictable, and here's the essential point. Women can distinguish when a man offers validation from desperation versus when he offers it from abundance. They can sense the distinction and they respond completely differently to each. The fifth principle is straightforward but severe. Never pursue energy that's retreating. This contradicts everything romantic cinema taught you. They suggested that genuine care requires fighting for her, pursuing her, displaying your interest. But in reality, that's fantasy. Pursuing destroys attraction. Why? Because in biology, animals that chase signal inferior status, the pursuit is perceived as the reward. Humans aren't dramatically different. When you chase someone withdrawing, you communicate wordlessly. You're more valuable than me. I require your attention more than you require mine. And once that dynamic establishes itself, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Authentic detachment means that when she withdraws, you also withdraw, calmly, without theatrics, without a desperate message inquiring what occurred, you simply depart. And the paradox is that this separation, this absence of need, frequently returns her, because now she experiences the void. She senses that something has vanished. Machiavelli documented something profound in The Prince about maintaining respect. He stated it's preferable to be feared than loved if you cannot achieve both. But in attraction's context, this doesn't mean inspiring fear. It means it's preferable to preserve your dignity and your distance than to be accommodating and accessible if it renders you invisible. Respect invariably precedes attraction, always, and the sixth principle concludes this section perfectly. Display amusement rather than taking offense. When she expresses something provocative, when she challenges you with sarcasm or a teasing comment, the typical man defends himself, explains himself, becomes upset. The individual with genuine detachment laughs, and that laughter isn't ridicule, it's emotional mastery. It demonstrates that nothing she expresses can disturb your center. There's research on emotional conflict indicating that whoever can maintain humor during confrontation displays psychological excellence, because humor requires emotional distance. It requires remaining unhooked. When a woman observes that she can deliver a challenge, a sharp remark, and you simply smile as though it's entertaining, she becomes nervous. In the appropriate way, because she realizes she doesn't possess the influence over you that she assumed. Consider the last time someone attempted annoying you and failed. What happened subsequently? They likely intensified their efforts, or they surrendered and respected you more. The identical thing occurs here. Your emotional condition cannot be hijacked, and that, my friend, represents genuine authority. Before we proceed, let me request something. In the comments, contribute advice you'd offer other men regarding this, something you've learned from experience. Because we're collectively learning, improving, and your experience might help someone else awaken. We're approaching the point where most men self-sabotage unknowingly, and it concerns something you perform daily, likely multiple times daily, without considering the ramifications. Distributing your attention and your approval as though it's worthless. But here's the reality no one reveals. Your attention is the most precious resource you possess, and you distribute it as though it's unlimited. Consider it this way. Imagine your attention is currency. Every message you transmit, every compliment you offer, every time you demonstrate you're contemplating her, you're expending. And when you expend without discernment, without strategy, without making that expenditure meaningful, you create inflation. Your currency forfeits value. It's precisely like when nations print excessive money. Initially, abundance seems apparent, but eventually that money purchases nothing because there's excessive circulation. Your validation functions identically. When you offer it without filtering, it completely forfeits purchasing power. The seventh principle is direct. Maintain your intentions unspoken. Mystery amplifies influence. And this is where many men commit a fatal error. They believe they must be transparent, direct, honest about their feelings. I must inform her I'm interested so she understands. No, you don't need to inform her anything. In fact, in many situations, informing her destroys precisely what you're constructing. There's a theory in behavioral economics termed information gap theory. Essentially, it states that individuals become obsessed with completing missing details. The mind detests gaps. When something is partially revealed, partially concealed, the mind cannot cease attempting to solve the puzzle. The individual who reveals everything immediately, who displays all his cards initially, eliminates that tension. He removes curiosity, and without curiosity, there's no pursuit. He becomes something understood, predictable, secure, and what's secure isn't thrilling. Conversely, the individual who retains something for himself, who provides clues but never fully confirms, who maintains part of himself concealed, that individual becomes irresistible because he represents an unsolved mystery. Now be careful, this doesn't mean being dishonest. It doesn't mean cruelly manipulating someone's emotions. It simply means not revealing everything instantly. Allow her to discover, allow her to inquire, allow her to wonder. Because it's within that discovery process that genuine attraction constructs. Eighth principle, reward with attention, not with effort. And this one is subtle, but it transforms everything. There's a substantial difference between making effort for someone and offering her your attention when she deserves it. Effort is frequently perceived as desperation. Deliberate attention is perceived as power. When an individual overextends himself, when he compromises excessively to please, when he orchestrates elaborate encounters for someone he barely knows, he's operating from scarcity. He's communicating, I require this to succeed because I have no alternatives. But when an individual offers his time selectively, when his attention increases only when she's cooperative, respectful, authentic, he's operating from abundance, and that distinction is experienced. It's perceived in every interaction. This connects to something Machiavelli understood about power dynamics. He observed that favors granted freely rarely generate loyalty, but favors earned consistently do. Individuals value what they must obtain through effort. When you provide them everything without them contributing anything, they take it for granted. In social conditioning, this is termed reward-based interaction. If she perceives that your attention increases only when she's at her best, she naturally aligns with that pattern. Not because you're manipulating her, but because humans respond to incentives. We've always functioned this way. The ninth principle connects perfectly to it. Remain unpredictable, but consistent in your energy. This confuses many men because it sounds paradoxical. How can you be unpredictable and consistent simultaneously? It's simple. Your emotional condition, your composure, your confidence, that never changes. You remain the identical stable person regardless of circumstances. But your actions, your responses, when you appear and when you vanish, those remain difficult to anticipate. It's the identical principle that makes games addictive. Your baseline condition is secure, but the outcome is uncertain. This creates what psychology terms variable reward conditioning. It's the reason individuals can sit before a slot machine for hours. They don't know when the reward is arriving, but they know it might arrive. Women are drawn to this dynamic because it promises excitement without chaos, stability without monotony. It's the perfect equilibrium between security and adventure. Now, let me pose a question because I want to hear your perspective. From your experience, what works better to initiate a conversation with someone? An unexpected compliment that catches her by surprise. An open-ended question about something she enjoys. Write A or B in the comments and briefly explain why you chose that option. I want to see which approach wins in this video because the truth is both can work, but it depends on how you use them and in what context. And your experience can teach all of us something valuable. We're now reaching the level that most men simply cannot reach. And it's not from lack of information, it's from lack of inner truth. Because everything we've discussed so far can become an empty technique if you do unchange something fundamental inside you. And that fundamental thing is this. You must release the result. And when I say release, I don't mean pretending you don't care while secretly hoping it works. I mean truly being fine regardless of what happens. That is real detachment. And that, my friend, is where real power resides. The difference between acting indifferent and being indifferent to the result is vast. The first is a facade. The second is liberation. And women can sense the difference from considerable distance. Consider the last time you genuinely desired something. A job, an opportunity, anything. And consider how you acted during that interview or conversation. You were likely tense, measuring every word, attempting to say the right thing. And that tension was likely visible. Now consider a situation where the result didn't matter to you. Perhaps a relaxed conversation with a stranger you were never going to encounter again. How did you feel? Relaxed, natural yourself? And that conversation was likely incredibly smooth. That's what happens when you release. When you're truly not attached to the idea of winning or losing, your energy changes. You become present, authentic, and it's that authenticity that truly attracts. The 10th principle is the heart of all of this. Release the outcome completely. Most men lose their presence because they're secretly anticipating something. A message, a sign, a confirmation that she's interested. And that hope leaks through their body language, their voice tone, the way they interact. Detachment eliminates that energy completely. In sports psychology and meditation, this is termed the flow state. It's when the mind focuses entirely on the process, not on the goal. The best athletes worldwide discuss this. When they stop contemplating winning and simply play, that's when they perform at their peak. The identical thing happens with women. When you approach them with this flow energy, where you're not trying to win anything, where you are simply being, they feel something strange, something they don't feel from other men. They feel that you're not trying to take anything from them, and that absence of hidden intention is magnetic. Now, the 11th principle deepens this. Treat women's interests like background noise. When an individual truly masters detachment, even obvious interest from a woman doesn't change his rhythm. He sees it, he registers it, and he keeps moving. This isn't arrogance, it is emotional control. There's a concept in psychology termed stimulus immunity. Essentially, the brain stops reacting to validation because it is already full, he doesn't need more of it. When women perceive that their attention doesn't buy your focus, curiosity multiplies because they are used to men completely changing when they show interest. Men become more attentive, more available, more anxious. But when you don't do that, when you remain exactly the same, she begins to wonder, what does he have that the others don't? And that question has no easy answer, so she keeps thinking about you. The 12th principle is pure tactic, never rush to fill the silence. We already talked about silence, but this goes further. Because when you are detached from the outcome, silences don't make you uncomfortable. In fact, you enjoy them. Most men panic when there's a pause. They feel they must say something, anything to keep the conversation alive. But that's fear speaking, the fear of losing her, the fear that she get bored, the fear that she walk away. The detached individual does not have this fear, because if she leaves, it doesn't matter, he is complete with or without her. And when she sees that you can remain silent without anxiety, that you're not fighting to keep her attention, something shifts. Suddenly, she starts talking more, she fills the gaps, she works to keep the conversation going. And without you noticing, the entire dynamic has reversed. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of not revealing desperation. He understood that in any negotiation, whoever has the fewest needs holds the most power. He wasn't discussing romance, but the principle is universal. In relationships, in business, in politics, whoever can walk away without suffering always controls the board. The 13th principle takes this to the next level. Allow others to explain themselves more than you. When you talk excessively, you lose power through your words, you reveal too much, you provide too much information. And every detail you provide is one less piece of the mystery to solve. The detached individual observes more than he speaks. He asks brief questions. He allows the other person to fill the space. This comes from interrogation psychology, where whoever speaks the least always controls the dynamic. Women pick up on this instinctively. They feel that your quiet comes from confidence, not fear. And they chase your attention because you never provide it easily. The 14th principle is about energy. Do not adjust yours to match others. This is emotional leadership in its purest form. When a woman is loud, emotional, dramatic, and you remain steady, your calm rewrites the rhythm of the entire interaction. There are studies on emotional contagion showing that individuals adopt the emotional tone of the person who is most centered. That's why in times of crisis everyone looks to the calmest one. Not because he has the answers, but because his emotional state offers safety. When you maintain your energy regardless of how she behaves, you're not only showing your detachment from the outcome, you're showing your detachment from her emotional state. And that communicates something deep, that your peace does not depend on her, that you are good with yourself, that you are a complete individual, and a man complete in himself is the most attractive thing there is. Listen, in the end it all comes down to this: women are not complicated. You complicate things when you play the wrong game, when you chase instead of attract, when you try instead of release. Detachment is not cruelty, it is self-respect. It is refusing to betray yourself for attention. It is understanding that a man who is complete in himself does not need external validation to feel valuable. And when you reach that point, when you are truly good with yourself, with or without her, something shifts. You stop chasing, you stop begging, and you start living from a place of real abundance. That is what women feel. That is what they cannot resist. Now, the 15th principle reveals a truth almost no man has ever realized. Allow her to collide with your reality, don't adjust to hers. Most men bend their habits, their schedule, their rhythm to fit into a woman's life. But a powerful individual allows his life to be the filter. His standards, routines, pace, values, these act like a gravitational field. She must enter his orbit, not the other way around. Psychologists term this dominant frame persistence. The individual whose world remains intact becomes the psychological center of the interaction. When she realizes you are a world, not a man chasing a moment, her instinct switches from evaluation to fascination. You don't move toward her life, your life pulls her. The 16th principle introduces a concept no dating coach will ever teach. Control the emotional climate of the interaction before it begins. Most men react. They wait to see how she behaves, how she speaks, how she sets the tone. But the master sets the emotional temperature before the first word. He chooses the pace, the softness or sharpness, the seriousness or playfulness in his first breath, his first posture, his first look. This is termed pre-frame atmosphere control, a technique used in negotiations and intelligence work. You don't just enter the room, you bring an atmosphere with you. Your energy becomes the weather, and she adapts to your climate without even understanding what's happening. The 17th principle enters territory that only psychological warfare specialists know. Allow your boundaries to speak louder than your charm. Charm is cheap, presence is everywhere. Compliments are abundant. But boundaries, calm, non-negotiable, unspoken boundaries, are extremely rare. You don't demand respect, you generate respect by what you do not tolerate. And here's the secret. When a woman encounters an individual whose boundaries are clear, silent, and consistent, her nervous system interprets him as a leader. No shouting, no speeches, no proving, simply a quiet, immovable line that says, I don't chase validation, I don't excuse disrespect, and I don't collapse for attention. This principle alone separates men who attract from men who are forgotten. The 18th principle is something even philosophers hinted at but never explained. Hold a private world she's not allowed to enter, not secrets, not manipulation, not double lives. A private world, an inner space that remains untouched. Your discipline, your solitude, your personal rituals, your intellectual obsessions, your spiritual center. Jung termed this the sanctum of the self, a psychological fortress where your identity is forged. Women are drawn to men who feel whole, not to men who place their entire identity in romance. Your unshared world becomes your aura. The mystery is not something you create, it's something you protect, and she feels it. She feels there is more to you than what she sees. And that more is what pulls her. The 19th principle is the one no one teaches because it requires true mastery. Allow your silence to have intention, not emptiness. Most men go silent because they have nothing to say. Weakness, fear, awkwardness, the master's silence is a message. Silence that communicates I choose when to engage. I am not rushed, I am not performing. This is termed intentional absence, a technique used by high-level interrogators and leaders. When silence carries intention, it feels heavy. It feels meaningful. It creates psychological pressure without hostility. Women interpret this silence as depth, as confidence, as emotional sovereignty. Your silence becomes a presence. The 20th principle is the final principle, the one that separates boys from sovereign men. Become the destination, not the journey. Most men act like they are part of her path, a lesson, a phase, an experience. But a sovereign individual is the destination, not a stop, the arrival. He is not a chapter. He is the library, he is not a moment, he is the timeline. And here is the paradox. When you embody a life of meaning, a mission, a direction, a purpose so strong that she feels pulled into it, you no longer seek attraction, you generate it. Women don't chase men, they chase gravity. Becoming the destination means your existence creates momentum. Your purpose becomes the magnet. Your composure becomes the throne. And any woman who enters your life doesn't feel like she won you. She feels like she found something rare, complete, irreplaceable. In the end, everything collapses into one truth. You were never meant to run. Not after her, not after attention, not after validation, not after love you had to earn. You were meant to stand, to breathe, to exist with a gravity so quiet it bends the world without movement. Because a man becomes powerful not when he is desired, but when he stops needing desire. Not when he learns tricks, but when he learns himself. You are not chasing the feminine, you are returning to the masculine, to the birthplace of sovereignty, to the silence where certainty grows, to the composure that cannot be taken, to the presence that cannot be shaken. And in that stillness, in that unbothered center, women feel what the world rarely gives them. A man who does not ask to be chosen, a man who chooses himself. And when a man chooses himself, everything else follows. Respect follows. Desire follows. Connection follows.